Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryang Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishabhai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let's summarize chapter 1, 2, and 3. So let's start with chapter 1. Chapter 1 is really the journey of a human being. And this journey starts with Arjuna, or Arjunina, the female version. And he was trying to live a happy life like the rest of us, trying to make sense of things, and it wasn't working out. So he was attempting to settle accounts with the side that's causing him pain. He was attempting to bring some light to the situation, to make things more settled. So these are all things that we all want. And it wasn't working out because he found himself at the battlefield in despair and disappointment. So this is very telling of life itself. So we have this idea of what things are, what things are not. And we build images and fantasy. And this fantasy is very pleasing and soothing sometimes. And this fantasy allows us to cope and make sense of reality sometimes. So Arjuna had this too. He had, for the longest time, this idea that he's going to take, make things even with the Kauravas, understandably so, because it was causing him and his side distress. So his expectations were evaporating the moment he came to the reality. So like this, we all come to this point where we live in a certain idea or a bubble in reference to how my partner should be, what my business should be like, how much money I should be making, what my health should be like, whether I'm going to exercise, how much I'm going to exercise, what kind of a body I will have, how well my eyesight will be. And so we naturally have these ideas that keep us, right, hopeful about the future. But reality shows us something very different. And this difference is why Arjuna, having lived and taken comfort in his bubble, once it popped, and it's meant to pop, it always pops, because the empirical world is always more powerful than someone's minuscule fantasy. It's always going to eventually supersede someone's imagination. And this is good. Otherwise, if this weren't the case, one would remain in a stuck mode for eons. And this is not how Ishvara's system is designed. It's designed that at a certain stage of life, whether they call it midlife crisis or whatever these names are, you don't have to give it a term, but we come to this point and we say, what have I really done with my life? Have I really moved forward? Was it really worth it? And what really came of all of this? Did it serve my values? Did I really engage deeply? Was it all superficial? What is the point of all of this? And so this is the natural cycle of life. And not everyone is going to start to inquire like this when they come to this crisis. But Arjuna did, because he had two things. He had dharma on his side, and he had viveka. So just to have dharma, you will naturally ask, what's the point of just sense indulgence? If I don't have dharma, then you're not going to ask that question. So dharma itself, how touch you are with what needs to be done, with harmony, with the good things of life, with what is healthy, that alone will determine what kind of questions you ask, which is why Arjuna was able to ask the right kind of questions, namely, how do I come out of this situation? And even when I do, then what? This is going to be another situation, right? It's always going to be like that, right? I've come out of situations millions of times, and this is just one more situation. When I come of it, what's going to happen? One more situation, which is why he asked the second question, which is, what of all of this? Where is this all going? What's the highest purpose of just solving situations? Or could there be one problem solving which solves all other problems once and for all? Could that be the case? So he had enough discernment, viveka, and enough righteousness, or just being a harmonious, humble, down-to-earth person to ask these questions. And so we can see the order: expectation, and then there's a bursting of the bubble. Expectations, they fail to be fulfilled. And then when they fail to be fulfilled, then we ask for the solution. So this is his now asking. But when you ask for the solution, he doesn't stop there, because what did he want next? He asked Krishna, I want to retire. I want to retreat to some quiet place, which is indicative of the next natural step that we engage in. Give me the pill, path of least resistance. So having come to the solution, having come to the problem, now the solution I seek, but I seek it in what way? A way that will give me that will remove this pain as soon as possible, because pain is not easy to bear. And so Krishna then said to him, that will not be a good idea. You need to stay where you are to resolve this situation, because you would take this big bubble into the Himalaya. And so Krishna used this perfect opportunity to, having been first asked, to answer and provide the solution. Therefore, if you take entire chapter 1, it's really just a universal phenomena that everyone goes through. You can look at it like that. I'm not saying it's the only way to look at it, but for now, it started out how? Expectation. This is how life will be when I finish school, when I get married, when I have children, and so on. Common to all. Having had expectations, reality shows me something else. Therefore, disappointment or despair or re-questioning things. Having gone through expectations and then disappointment, what's the next step? I look for the solution. But when I look for the solution, I need to resist the urge of a quick pill, because it won't be enough to show you the depth and the nuances that you need to truly address the problem. So resisting the urge for a quick pill, what's next? Then I seek support. And thus Krishna comes into one's life. So chapter 1 is like this. And it can, of course, it can be looked at from different angles, you know, from a cultural context, from Arjuna's context, but I look at it in a context of life, because this is what Gita really is, in my view, showing us.
Yeah, I think the one thing that would really help anyone seeking is to contemplate on why it is called yoga, despondency, right? And despair and despondency. Why is it called yoga? So anything that helps you to turn the face towards truth is yoga.
Why is there disappointment right now? How has it come to this place? What took place for disappointment or confusion to arise? In what ways could have I been involved And in what ways can I take accountability now that there is what there is? What small changes could be made so that this despondency can be, given more space to breathe? What have I missed? What needs more attention? Then chapter 2. So Krishna is now facing Arjuna at the battlefield, and there's so many ways to begin the conversation in any situation. But Krishna began with Arjuna by stating, see, depends on what person's there, right? So what is this? He's trying to encourage him. He says, what is this despondency of yours? This despondency of yours is unbecoming. It is, you're yielding to unmanliness. This was stated in 2.2 and 2.3. And so Krishna, in the sense, is just kind of doing this more of a, direct approach. Like, what is this? This is, unmanliness. Just go and do what you have to do. Now, if you do this with everyone, you think this style is going to work with everyone? No. So you see, there's no right way to initiate a conversation. Owing to the dynamic in the situation that was there, this was seemingly the most appropriate situation. You could have said to Arjuna, oh, I understand how you feel. It's terrible to be in this place. I too can definitely imagine and not having the right course of action and having to seek support. I would definitely yield to this unbecoming way and to unmanliness. I can certainly bring you a tissue. Is there anything else that I can do for you? I'm your friend. I want you to be happy. What do you want from me? You could have said that too. You could have just remained silent and just wait for him to continue speaking, right? You could do it so many ways. So then Arjuna, naturally, as we all do, we justify. We don't just say a statement, we always follow it up. Arjuna said, it's not wise to kill those who are relatively good people. Bhishma and Drona are relatively good people who have taught many skills of wisdom and skills of archery. And they are my teachers, and I respect them. So naturally, you would not want to hurt your teacher or say, bad words or anything. So it's understandable. And once again, there are many ways to follow this up. But what Krishna did, very interesting, is he went to the self, because he recognized that Arjuna was in a bubble, in his little bubble, and for him, that bubble was locked into a situation. And Krishna had to take him out of that bubble and present a much larger view. Because if Krishna starts to talk about within the bubble, if he talks within the same level that Arjuna's mind is in, it might not work, because Arjuna has dharma and viveka. He's already bounced around the bubble and looked at different situations. He's not a beginner. He's already a wise warrior, a husband, a brother. He's got so much experience. He's got so much talent. He's already looked at different situations within that bubble. So Krishna has to take him out. And thus he starts to mention the teachings of the self. He says, let me show you that this bubble of yours, this battle, these are like images on the screen of consciousness. And this battle is just one tiny fraction of the storyline that's been happening forever. And it will never stop. And you are right now just a fictional character called Arjuna, who happens to be in this situation, in this place, at this time, with the people that you're with the teachers that you have, and you have a responsibility because you're not outside this vast order. And so he wants to first show Arjuna that the people he believes he's about to end are just like fictional characters, just called Bhishma, Drona, okay? And he says, and you too are a fictional character. And so if you start to look at life like this, then perhaps you start to maybe, get your view shaking up a little bit, because we put so much effort on looking at situations. But if you look at situations, you will never quite resolve any situation completely, because you cannot resolve a situation completely, only temporarily. It's only a matter of time before things change and a new situation has popped up. So whatever you really do, it's ultimately a self-defeating journey. And so Krishna reminds Arjuna, wait, you have been a participant in this vast, endless story for eons, and so have these characters too. And unless I show you something much larger, you will not be able to move, because you will think that what you see is real. And yet what you see is just a storyline, a series of appearances on the screen of consciousness. And the real truth, that which is real, can never be destroyed. That which is real can never be hurt. And the reason why you have bitterness and are unable to move is because you believe what you see in front of you is real. And that stops you from doing what needs to be done. That makes you take things so personally and emotionally involved that you are stuck. So if you create some space and just take Krishna's word provisionally as true, in time, it will become more and more obvious, of course, but provisionally true, you start to appreciate this reality as just almost like a learning school, a school to come, figure the truth out, and leave. That was the only real purpose why you came here. But while you are here, owing to your karma and the past causes that are unseen, you happen to come with a certain family, with a certain talent, with a certain male, female body, with a certain height, with a certain composure, with a certain eye color, with a certain hair color, with a certain parents, with a certain siblings. It just happens to be like that. But that's not the end of the world. Having been given whatever you're given, make the best of it and do what you are being asked to do based on where you are located in, because there's no real other way to pass this journey. And so Arjuna starts to hear this message and is still not quite convinced, but it is at least starting to starting to help him see this picture as not something that is too serious, but something that you just have to kind of undergo. And there's a much larger reality to this whole picture. Pankaj.
I had a question. Can we say that Krishna took Arjun out of the Vyavharik Satya and brought him to the Paramarthik Satya?
He showed him that owing to Arjun's busyness and his involvement in transactional things, he missed something out that was there all along, and that's the Paramarthika. So in that sense, he took him, not that he actually took him somewhere else. He just showed him, hey, you're missing a reality that is right here, right now, but owing to your busyness and lack of inquiry, you just don't see it because your eyes are programmed to see form. Your eyes are programmed to hear Drona's sounds and hear, I love you. Oh, I love you too. That's what your eyes or ears are programmed to. But what you don't see is the intelligence behind it all. And so Krishna wants to reveal that to him through a cognitive understanding. Therefore, your eyes can only see form, but your cognition looks at the form and it takes that form to the final reality. And that's what Arjuna hasn't realized, which is why you can only act what you see. If I only see forms, I can only act according to what I see, because that form will always give you an association. I love Drona. I love this teacher. I, cherish them. That's where your vision stops. But the moment you see deeper into that, then it's not just love now. It's not just anger now. It is doing what has to be done. There is a story. There is a answer to all of this. There is participation. There is knowing the reality. There is so much more than just, I love you, full stop, and let's live like that. So you're right. He was showing him, in fact, Pankaj, he was taking him from pratibhasika, from subjectivity, to vyavaharika, to paramarthika. So he was now showing him all three levels of reality, and he was making it very clear. This is your stuff. Anger, bitterness, grudges, this is your stuff. What has to be done, what is in front of you, this is vyavaharika. But don't stop at vyavaharika. The reality is also there, through and through both pratibhasika and vyavaharika.
Thank you.
So then Arjuna, being curious, he naturally wants to know, well, who are these wise people? Because you speak of them who recognize all these three realities. And so Krishna says they are able to, in fact, Arjuna says, how does he or she sit, speak, and walk? So this is indicative of the kind of question that you would naturally ask at the beginning. How does a wise person, what do they wear? How do they look like? You don't ask things, what do they know? You ask, what do they look like? So this is a journey of a beginner spiritual seeker. They want to know, what do you look like? How do you sound like? How do you speak? But Krishna took him deeper, and he got him to ask a different kind of question. And he said to him, the wise person is able to give up desires. What? How is this possible? Well, then Krishna explains, not every kind of desire. You don't give up desires to walk, to sit, to eat, to reach out and help. You don't give that up. This is normal vyavaharika desires. This is a natural desire. But he or she is able to give up those desires that don't have a real purpose, right? They don't have a real, they're just like these flimsy, short-term flicks, you know, these kind of things to satisfy me. Because the wise person is no longer, they no longer have anything to lose or gain. You see, an unwise person who still has something to lose or gain, for that reason, they still want to pursue their desire. And they want to, you know, have a good life. They want to, you know, accomplish something and be something and prove themselves to someone and become someone, because there is a person, there's an I who has something to gain or lose. But for a wise jnani, there is no such thing. There is no, I have something to gain by whatever, teaching or marrying or having kids, or I have something to lose. There's none of that. There's just what is required, that I attend to. The wise person doesn't teach, for example, because I want to teach. There's no more of that. They teach, why? Because somebody wants to learn. See the difference? Somebody wants to learn, thus one reaches out and just provides what is wanted by Ishvara's order. So in that sense, they're able to give up desires, which is another testimony of their hard, consistent, deliberate work to let go of those things that are just not that useful at all. You see, initially, there are these impressions that you still kind of want to do, you know, some, you know, spoil yourself once in a while. This is all fine. But it's actually a very telling statement of a wise person's testimony of their hard work of asking, is this really required? Is this really needed? Where am I, where do I, you know, where can I serve? What can this instrument be of use? Where can it be of use? So in that sense, they give up those desires. They're just these little flicks or flings or whatever you call them, short-term, you know, they're just kind of sensually gratifying, which is okay. We're not saying stop. But Where is my attention needed? So one's attention becomes a lot more focused and a lot more, you could say, loka sangraha, giving to the well-being of those around. He also says the wise is unaffected by adversities. Now, adversity just means unpleasant situations. Now, there's two ways to interpret this. The jnani is unaffected by adversities. The first is because when you give up this whole thing of longing or desire or reaching out or constantly more noise in the world, you simply reduce complexity in life. Because it's like, so it's just a situation. It's just a date. It's just a, it's just whatever. It's just a kiss. It's just whatever, right? So you no longer have these complexes in your life. And the second is, does a situation ever truly affect me, the self? No. You see, you only experience bitterness or anger if you believe that that person hurt me. When you recognize that you can never truly be hurt, that you are eternally pure, whole, and complete, that's when forgiveness becomes possible. You see, this word forgiveness is beautiful. It says, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You're right. They don't know what they do. Most don't know what they do. I don't even know what I'm doing sometimes. Do you? So forgive our mistakes. We don't quite know what we do. But second of all, why do I forgive you? Because you never hurt me. Nothing real has actually been touched. That's the only way to forgive. Otherwise, it becomes this kind of a coping mechanism. Forgive, kind of a pettiness. Oh, I forgive you. I forgive you because you're nobody. I'm not talking about that. I forgive you because all that happened was just two fictional characters in this eternal play have just come and interacted, said something, but nothing real got touched. All just a mixture, molding and shaping of mithya forms, intelligence reorganizing itself in an eternal fashion. The story that has begun since beginningless time, it will never end. And two characters called Thomas and Pankaj and Michael and Ravikant happen to intersect. Something happened, and now one of them gets angry. And one of them says, I forgive you. What do you mean you forgive me? How can you forgive me? I forgive you because whatever happened never happened to me. It happened to a character called Ravikant, Pankaj, Thomas, Michael. For that reason, I hold no grudges against you. And so in this manner, one is not affected by adversities. And it also said, they neither rejoice excessively, nor do they hate unpleasantness. Why? Again, because it is just a storyline that will never end. It's not supposed to end. And there is no right or wrong in the storyline. It has just been going on, and it's going on right now. And all you can do as a fictional character in the story is just do your part, knowing fully well that nothing ever displaces or contaminates or taints my true self. And then life becomes so much more, you could say, impersonal, but caring at the same time. So they neither rejoice too much in pleasure. Why? Because pleasure is pleasure. It's got its limitations. It's got its limits. It's time bound. It's not going to last. But also they neither hate things too much, because everyone is going to make mistakes. And the world is, made in a way that everyone has to learn their lessons. Everyone's learning. So this is kind of like a school. You came to a school called life, the school of life, and you're meant to make mistakes here. Otherwise, we can't progress. And he also says the wise person is like, I know, Lena, is like the ocean. In other words, when rivers go inside the oceans, that means when good things flow inside, the experience of the person, they don't touch me because I am full like the oceans. And when things evaporate, when, unpleasantness happens, they don't touch me at all because I'm full like the ocean. So this means at the level of the ocean and the level of the wave, lots of movement is going on. Yeah? Lots of movement. Does the movement ever stop? No. Sometimes the ocean is calm. Sometimes the ocean is very stormy and loud. But at the level of the H2O, there is just stillness, limitless stillness, silence, peace. It's oblivious. H2O is oblivious what's happening at the level of the ocean, Ishvara, and at the level of the wave, which is the Jiva, because the H2O is through and through every inch, every bit of the ocean and every bit or part of the wave. In fact, there is no parts, but H2O is everywhere. H2O always remains H2O, irrespective of whether you have the greatest hurricane going on in the ocean, the greatest war, the greatest peace. H2O remains limitlessly forever H2O. So that is compared metaphorically to consciousness.
There's always going to be conflict because with the partial knowledge having that limited sense capacity, you're never going to get the full story of everything. You're only getting one narrow vision of something, and someone else has got the same narrow vision, or even if you've got an expanded sort of lateral vision, it's still limited. So conflict is inevitable when you've got that limited individual sense capacity with your sense limits.
Sometimes there is the Dunning-Kruger effect, and this is a phenomenon in psychology where they overestimate their knowledge. There was this one guy on YouTube. He was a fast food cook, ordinary job, but he discovered that there was this whole world of skills he could learn, like guitar and Rubik's Cube and chess. And he said, my world is opening up to me. I am now brilliant at playing chess. I am brilliant at playing the Rubik's Cube. So he challenges the top master, Magnus Carlsen, in chess. And this guy just started to play chess, but he was so convinced that he's so good that he just challenged someone in the 3,200 chess rating, and he totally failed. Doing the Rubik's Cube, I can solve this. But he doesn't recognize there are these amazing kids in Asia who can solve the Rubik's Cube blindfolded. They actually look at the Rubik's Cube, this is amazing. They look, interesting, okay, cool. They memorize it, they close their eyes, and they solve it in about 10 seconds. Yeah, so when we tend to overestimate what we know, and this is called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it comes off kind of sometimes arrogant, lack of humility, and like I know, like I don't need to know more. I know what I know is what I know. I know a lot, and this is a big a disadvantage for the person's growth. In fact, you're not supposed to know everything. That's a relief, isn't it? Because as long as we have an upadhi, the upadhi will have limited knowledge, limited understanding, and limited everything. So that's okay. Only when you drop the upadhi, then, right, I am all knowledge, all power. But for now, there is a certain limitation. And then finally, Krishna says, once you understand this reality, then it can never be lost. Why? Because it's not like there's a limited individual who is gaining the limitless reality. In that case, it can be lost because that which is limited will always be forgetful, will always change, but you're discovering something that you already were all along. You just didn't know it. So once you discover limitlessness, which happens to be you, then you can't go back because going back is not limitless. It's, right, limitation. So Krishna says first, your truth is that which is vast, infinite, all knowledge, all power, limitless in every way. That means you cannot say there's something outside of it. You are everything. You happen to be that right now. When you discover that, there's no way to go back, which is why once knowledge is gained, there's no going back, no matter what. It's a one-off in one life. And when that happens, then after your body drops, you are free forever. You are now home. Not that you are home somewhere, but you're already home right now. Just you don't have the suit anymore being worn, called your name. Now, chapter 3, Arjuna throws a question because he's a little bit confused. He says, so Krishna, on one hand, you say the ultimate purpose of being here is to discover my truth through knowledge, through the pramana. On the other hand, you say that that knowledge cannot be attained through an action because action can only give me, can only reach something. That's why you apply an action to reach something. But my nature is already here and now, so I can't reach it. An action can only purify something, but I'm already ever pure. An action can only, change something or make some improvements, but I'm already perfect. So action is not the solution. And now you're telling me, go and do karma yoga, go and do action. So on one hand, you say self-knowledge is, important, and it is the only worthy pursuit, and it cannot be gained through action. On the other hand, you tell me, go and pursue action. Why does he say this? What would you say if you were Krishna?
I'm going to have a go at this. I'd say it's two things. One is that because you didn't understand, or the truth of Sankhya Yoga didn't land, and that you're still questioning it, means that you're still identified with the doer enjoyer. And the idea of karma yoga is to kind of shake up the individual and to come to understand that you're not the doer enjoyer, that you are the ultimate truth, and that the body-mind complex actually belongs to Ishvara, in Ishvara's order.
Beautiful.
I'd say it's like in two parts. One is the fact that there is no option of not doing anything. There, you have to do something. That's the first step. And having said that, do it not in an individual's point of view, but in a bigger scheme of things, like that objectivity, subjectivity thing, where it's not just from the individual's point of view. What is good for the bigger scheme of the community, or, larger scale? So these 2 points, I think, would be.
It's mostly the karma phala tyaga that is not ascertained yet in case of Arjuna. I think that is the thing that comes in karma yoga in chapter 4. But I think actually the actions are not performed according to your desires, but they're done without a specific outcomes attached to that for you.
As human beings, we are born with some swadharma, right? There is a purpose for which we have come into this world. So there is no option, like Srila, I think, mentioned, of not doing anything. You have to do what you have to do. Only thing what Bhagavan brings into the whole equation is doing what is the need of the hour, the right thing to do, as per your swadharma, rather than bringing your vasanas and all that into the play, which is what happens, and we get into the kartatva and bhoktatva, both. So beyond that, going beyond that, doing what is required to be done is probably what Bhagavan is telling us in this.
What I understand is that so self-knowledge and karma yoga, they are not you don't have to choose between two. You have to do karma yoga to purify your mind, to neutralize your raga desha by doing karma yoga, recognizing Ishvara everywhere and having a prasad buddhi and arpan buddhi. And once your mind is prepared for it, you will eventually have, and you will gain or you will gain the self-knowledge eventually. But your mind needs to be prepared, and that's the first step everyone has to go through.
See, it depends on who you're talking to. If you're Krishna, if you're talking to a very sattvic, calm, mature person who's got a different lifestyle, then you will say, well, then take renunciation. You can renounce and pursue self-knowledge. If you're speaking to most of us, like the most of us, then you will say, well, I know you want the highest, but I think it was Ashish, you have to undo a lot of things that you've acquired in your lifetime, and they keep you at bay. They keep you limited. They keep you thinking, I'm a small individual. I'm not good enough. I'll never get this. I can't figure this out. Moksha is for the next lifetime. All these self-imposed, self-limiting belief systems, you have to just, recognize they're not your friends, really. And because they're not your friends, some work is required. And this work that we in the Gita call is karma yoga. Now, karma yoga in modern language is self-growth, but it's not exactly self-growth. It's self-growth in the name of understanding the Lord, knowing my nature and the Lord's nature is one. If it's just self-growth and just self-improvement, that's not karma yoga. Karma yoga specifically is self-growth, self-development for the sake of helping my mind ascertain, come to the higher realities and see that it's all here and now. There's nothing out there. It's all in this moment available to me as myself. And there's nothing that I need to do other than just to recognize it. And so karma yoga helps us in this way. Now, one interesting point is, by whom is karma yoga prescribed? By Mr. Sniffles? By Mr. John? By Mr. Andre? By Mr. Random Fella? Or by the Lord Incarnate, the one who has witnessed our human journey since beginningless time, knows everything in the past, present, and the future is to be unfolded, of course, comes from all knowledge, all power.
I think Mr. Sniffles.
Yeah, from Mr. Sniffles definitely comes. And so Mr. Sniffles knows our journey. So this means that if you have just a random person who creates a random system and they call themselves a master, I have mastered life. Let me show you a system of self-development that will lead you to God. I have 50 years of experience. And I say to them, what do you know? 50 years. It's a fraction. You don't even know your own body. You take your body to the doctor. Help me. What's wrong? I don't know. You don't even know your body. And you say, I've mastered life. And that's going to take you to moksha. That's the difference between the Bhagavad Gita and pseudo-spiritual works by intelligent individuals. I've got names in my head, but I don't say them. They write books and they author them, and they're very popular. They got millions of views. But who does it come from? Mr. Sniffles, right? One individual who thinks they have worked it out. It makes sense to them. No. If you have a discerning mind, you will question that. You will say, I want to go to the source, the one who knows our struggle. And thus karma yoga, in that sense, becomes not a practice just for one culture. It is a universal practice, whether you know about it or not. Whether you think you're doing karma yoga or not, ultimately, all self-development, all improvement, all betterment is ultimately karma yoga.
That was just really interesting to me. You can be unaware of doing karma yoga and still be doing karma yoga. I thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
Most of us don't even know karma yoga name. You don't say I'm practicing. Nobody speaks like this. We say, what are you doing? Oh, I'm working on my emotions. I'm going to a therapy. I'm trying to make sense of things. I'm in a lot of pain. I'm asking, going to friends, getting help. This is how we speak, but we don't realize we are just exercising the Lord's system. Now, when the Lord brings it forward explicitly, then you go, wow. So I was on the right track all along. I just didn't know what name to attribute to it. But then he adds one more thing. He says, that's not the end. Your self-development, that's not the end. You're doing self-development for the sake of knowing the final truth. Because even the body and the mind that's self-developed, that too, at the end of your lifetime, is just dropped. Like nothing ever happened. Nothing ever existed. Nothing ever took place. What remains is the self. Now, this karma yoga has two parts. The first is, we said, samanya dharma. So samanya dharma is being fair. It is doing the right thing, even when there's a chance not to do the right thing. It is doing the right thing in a way that you may not get any benefits, you may not get rewarded, but you do the right thing because you know it is good for you. That's samanya dharma. Don't have to do it for others. Don't care what others think. I'm doing it for myself. Because if I do the wrong thing, easily today get away with it. Easily, no problems today. No punish, no hanging. You won't get hanged. You won't get stoned to death. So today it's very easy to commit, selfish, immature things. But you still, despite knowing that, you know that the guilt and the shame is just not worth it. And the second is swadharma. Swadharma is two things. The first is, it is based on a situation that you're put. That situation requires a certain responsibility, as in contrast to a different situation. So the people at home and the situations at home will ask of you something very different than situations and people at work. So wherever you are located, you are being asked to do something, to help, to reach out. That's number one. And number two, swadharma, is how do you reach out? You reach out according to talents and strengths, like this. For instance, on Wednesday, I flew to my parents' house, and my mom's having some awakening. She's kind of going, oh, I missed out on life, and there's so much more to life. And so she's kind of in a state of, not being really happy, because she's just being playing the role of work, come home, love kids, and repeat. So this is a common thing in retirement. And my job was to go there and do only one thing, to bring some resolution between her and my dad. So I sat down, took the role of a facilitator, a mediator, and with a piece of paper, and I said, do you want to suffer? No. Do you want to suffer? No. Do you want fulfillment, peace? Yes. Do you want fulfillment and peace? Yes. Great. So we're on the same page. Now, let's talk about mom. Let's talk about dad. So I got them to come together, because they're not able to do that right now. And the moment that finished, I said, my work is done. Now I'm going to go and borrow your car and see my friend. That's it. My swadharma is done. Do I think about it? No, because that's all I can do. I don't intermix myself. I don't think about it. Just do what you can do according to your talents. That's swadharma. And finally, chapter 3, he says, what are the two enemies in our life? And Krishna says, do we remember the two enemies?
Finding desire.
Started and followed by
Anger.
Anger, yeah. So now I want to ask one question, because you've heard this before. What gives rise to desire?
Agyan.
Oh, okay, good. You went even further back.
The feeling that I want to be,
Mm.
I want to have that fulfillment feeling, which is missing.
Andre, so for me, desire stems from your attachment to things like emotional values. You have intellectual values, emotional values, and and then from there you develop some kind, you dwell upon that, and then there develops a longing for it. And when you develop a feeling where you have to get it, that's where the desire happens.
Okay, and what would define your attachment to this and not that? Because you're right, so attachment leads to desire, but then what dictates what I'm attached to?
My tendencies. Sorry. No, I was going to say the tendencies, my past actions, my surroundings, my upbringing, maybe.
Okay, good. Gautam?
Yeah, the same thing. Again, put it like this: the extrinsic value that I have attached to it, depending on how I've been raised and how I've surrounded myself.
It is ignorance which drives the desire.
Yeah, so this is what Gautam said originally. This is like the root cause. Good.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Ashish said what gives rise to desires, and that is your attachment. Then I said what determines what you're attached to and not attached to. Because see, attachment, what is attachment? It's pressure. It's a pressure that it has to, right? It has to work itself out. It has to, it has to express itself. So now the question is then, what is it that gives that pressure? Because you didn't have that pressure at some point, remember? And at some certain point in time, that pressure suddenly arose.
It may have been said, but I'd say likes or dislikes, which then themselves stem from a sense of lack or a sense of not having something one way or the other. They're the same.
I think desire only happens when two things come together. One is like the projection of there is something that can take care of my need or my lack, right? So only in the objects there is no desire. Only in the sense of lack there is no desire. And when there is this projection of that object can take care of my sense of lack, that's when desire happens.
How do we differentiate between Samanya Dharma and Swadharma? And is there a possibility of a conflict? And if yes, then what is the one to be chosen?
Samanya Dharma is universal. I don't want to hurt you. You don't want to hurt others. You know, right? That you want to be a fair, honest, decent man who doesn't want to cheat, who doesn't want to see someone suffer or, we all know this. Now, Swadharma is, as I said, you are in a different country than I am. You're in India, and you are, I think, in North India, right? And you are located in a certain city, a certain place with certain connections with certain people. And because you have a connection to those people, to that country, to that place, what you do, what's asked of Gautam is very different than what's asked of Andre. Because I don't live in India. I live in a different house. I have different people around me. I have different everything. So depending on where you located, with whom you are with, that is what is being called of you. Now, when you exercise what is being called of you, and you kind of find a way to take a shortcut, I don't want to have a conversation with you. I just want to put it aside. And they really want to have a conversation. So what was called of you, Gautam, was to sit down and resolve it there. But because he found more convenience in kind of dismissing the conversation, that's a violation of Samanya Dharma. And when it's a violation, how does it come across? It comes across as disharmony between two parties. You feel it, and they feel it. So now next time, there's some awkwardness, there's some little bit of, I'm sorry. So you have to now readdress, you have to reconcile or repent because you crossed boundaries. You didn't do what was being asked of you.
If I may just try and ask you to resolve this.
Okay.
If I may take an example from Mahabharata or maybe Ramayana,
okay,
that Lord Krishna wanted Karan to fight for Pandavas, and he thought his Swadharma was to align with his friend Duryodhana, wherein his Samanya Dharma wanted him to align on the side which is right. Similarly, in Ramayana also, Vibhishan went to the side of Lord Ram because he thought that was his Samanya Dharma. And Kumbhakaran, also brother of Ravan, he sided with his brother saying that brotherhood is my Swadharma. Does it sound okay? I mean, is it?
Okay, let's go back to the Karna example. I just want to stick with one example. So the Karna, so in your opinion, do you think that Karna was aligning to Samanya Dharma?
No. Karna was alive. He thought that his Samanya Dharma was to be with his friend, and therefore he made it as his Swadharma, which was wrong. That's what was pointed out by Lord Krishna also, that what all along you thought was right was actually wrong. So his definition of dharma was wrong. He chose his Swadharma as brotherhood with his friend, and wherein he mistook it and got deviated from the overall goodness that was required from him.
So the way you can look at it is, it depends where the person's at. If they are deceived, if they are, on the wrong side, they're still engaging in Samanya Dharma. They're still, being nice to their partners, to their teammates, right? But on a larger scale, their Samanya Dharma is actually is not absolutely correct. There's always a wiser Samanya Dharma. And so, but it's still Samanya Dharma, isn't it? See, so we have to look at Samanya Dharma as having levels. You cannot quite say there's one absolute Samanya Dharma.
Okay, I thought there was level and subjectivity only for Swadharma. So there is subjectivity also for Samanya Dharma.
If he was on the side of the Pandavas, that would have been more right than he was on the side of the Kauravas. So that would be much more healthy for everyone. But he was not on that side. He was on the side of the Kauravas. Even when he was on the side of the Kauravas, he was still, to the best of his ability, applying Samanya Dharma in that context.
Okay.
Chapter 4. Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yogaha. Okay, so topic of renunciation of action through knowledge. The word renunciation here is not physical renunciation. It is the idea that you are an actor. So through the knowledge, we will discover that you're not this karta or this bhoga. Okay. So verse 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manurikshvakave Bravit Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Rajarshayo Viduhu Sakale Neha Mahata Yogo Nashtaf Parantapa.
Sri Bhagavan said, I taught this imperishable yoga to Vivaswan. Vivaswan taught it to Manu, and Manu taught it to Ikshvaku. Handed down from generation to generation, in this way, the kings who were sages knew it. But with the long lapse of time, Arjuna, the scorcher of foes, this yoga has declined in the world.
So first he says, I taught this yoga to Vivasvan, who taught it to Manu, who taught it to Ikshvaku. And it was handed down generation to generation. Okay. So what he's saying is that knowledge, any kind of knowledge that is handed down, it comes from the original author, from the source. It has to come from somewhere. It is from Ishvara. And it is not from individual speculation. So this is not an individual speculative originated knowledge. It is the knowledge that always was. And we humans, we come to observe what always was through observation. So if you have enough time, if you have the right circumstances, the right environment, the right people, the right mind, you will sit down and you will have these epiphanies and insights, as we all did. And when you do, you will discover something that was there all along. For example, Newton, gravity was there all along. He just observed, right, an object, and in reference to the movement of the object, he had to give this force some name. Now you can give this name whatever you want, but we called it gravity. So gravity was there. So in that sense, the knowledge of gravity was already there. And the first person who observes this is called a rishi. So a rishi is only the one who observes something for the first time ever. That's it. A rishi is now no more a rishi. You cannot say, oh, observe the gravity also, therefore I'm a rishi. No, it was already observed by Newton, therefore you're not a rishi. Newton's a rishi. So once this knowledge gets observed, then does it need to be observed again? Will you discover something new? Yeah, of course, in some situations you might, right? Depends on the context. But for the, by and large, if you observe it again, it's always going to fall down. So no further observation is required because I've observed it once. I've ascertained there's a force that always goes down. It never goes sideways. And therefore I call it gravity. So once the rishi recognizes something and cross-references it with other rishis or other kind of intelligent minds, discerning minds, then you say, okay, so this is how it always will be. So we need not look at it in, another way. So any kind of knowledge, if you think about it, has to have three components for any knowledge to work. The first is the source, in this case, Ishvara. The second is the rishi. Someone has to observe a fact that has not been seen before, though it was there all along. And the third is you have to pass what the rishi has recognized on. You have to pass it on. Otherwise, if you stop at the rishi, then no knowledge gets passed. And then you and I miss out on what is very precious and beneficial. So all these three things have to take place for us to say, let's go and learn science, geography, or Vedanta. Ishvara has to be there, the first rishi has to be there, and the tradition has to also recognize the value to want to pass it on. If you say, why should I pass on gravity? Well, because if you don't know the laws, you'll kill yourself. Oh, now I'm listening. So for the tradition to survive, passing on the knowledge, it has to, the one who passes it on has to recognize how is this important right here, right now for my livelihood and for the livelihood of everyone else who is just like me. Now, the difference between ordinary knowledge that is passed on and the knowledge that Krishna is passing on is that the knowledge in the Gita is not the kind that requires you to believe anything. You're not asked to believe or see something that is not here and now. Instead, the knowledge is such that it is directly revealable, showable, unfoldable in this moment, in this very moment that you are in, from your standpoint, from my standpoint, from anyone else's standpoint. If it's only revealable from my standpoint, but not revealable from your standpoint, you cannot call that true knowledge. Because true knowledge is that which is always true. It's true for everyone. The gravity is true for a North American, South American, and Antarctican, right? For every culture, gravity is true. In that same case, for knowledge of who you are and what you are and the cause of the universe, for that to be true, it has to be, assuming you have a mind that's capable, true for everyone. Now, keeping this in mind, Krishna then says, this knowledge, which you now know what knowledge truly means, you cannot negate it. It is non-negatable. For example, water always boils at 100 degrees sea level. That's knowledge. That's never going to change. Okay, so in that same case, right, your nature is awareness. That's never going to change. Now, in reference to this knowledge, he says, it is imperishable yoga. So what is the word yoga? He says, vivasvate yogam. He says, this yoga, this knowledge is imperishable. It never dies. Why does knowledge, now what does this mean? Knowledge never dies. And there's two reasons. There's two ways you can look at this. The first is knowledge of who you are is pointing towards what is unborn, will never cease, it cannot end. So if the knowledge reveals what is unceasing, unending, and cannot be modified into something else, then that knowledge itself is always going to be the same, because you're never going to show someone something else other than what is always true. So if you take this knowledge to someone that is 2,000 years older than us, it's going to be the same knowledge. If you take this knowledge 50 million years from now, it's going to be the same. So in that sense, he calls this knowledge imperishable yoga. Why? Because it is the kind of knowledge that points to something that is forever true. It never ceases, it never ends. Unlike an experience. You say, I saw God. This, what you guys are talking about in Advaita Vedanta, this is just like minuscule. I saw God. First of all, I'll say to you, careful. I would disagree with you because God is right here, right now. The one who's saying I saw God is not different from God. Second of all, what you're describing to me is something that happened once upon a time, but it's not true now. Therefore, you can't call it true knowledge. You can call it relative pointer to the true knowledge, but you cannot call it true knowledge. True knowledge is something that cannot be negated in the past, present, or the future, will always be as it is in its original condition. It will never be different other than what it is right now, and it will always be accessible to you wherever, whenever, at whatever place, in whosever body. That is true knowledge. So in that sense, this knowledge is imperishable, unlike an experience which has a perishability to it.
Would you say that true knowledge that you speak of would be considered eternal?
Eternal, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So true, imperishable, in other words, eternal yoga.
Okay.
In other words, the knowledge that never dies. So you can look at the significance of this. We're not speaking of something that will be negated by some other tradition, that will be negated by, say, Kabbalah or Buddhism or Kashmir Shaivism. We're talking about something that is through and through all things equally available to all, whether you miss it or not, that is your thing. But it is true for those who have the clear enough mind, owing to chapter 3, which we just finished, to recognize it, which is why chapter 4 naturally comes next. The second way that you can interpret true knowledge is like this. Everything in Ishvara's order is, there are certain things that are always true. For example, circle will always be a circle. Will circle ever be a square? 20 trillion years ago, was circle a square? No. Circle will always be a circle. Echo will always be an echo. It will always reflect sound back. Heat will always be heat. Light will always be light. So there are certain principles in our world which are eternally true. How we use them, that is up to us. That's a different story. But they are nevertheless always the same. Heat is that which has a certain temperature to it. A circle is that whose radius always remains equally no matter what. These are eternal principles of knowledge. So that's another way that you can say or interpret imperishable knowledge. But since we are talking about the nature of the self, naturally we're talking about more of the self rather than circle and echo and all these other phenomena that you will observe in the empirical world. Okay. Then he says, this yoga has declined in the world. The yoga word here is knowledge. Why has it declined in the world?
Misinterpretation.
Misinterpretation.
From a limited viewpoint.
Exactly. And this is very common. It is, it can be a problem. And people are naturally busy. They don't have the time to cross-reference, to check things up. You just generally want to teach But, you kind of go, oh God, I was didn't really explain it properly. But then your wife needs you, your husband needs you, so you don't have time to cross-reference. Now you're on to the next thing. So this is one possibility. The other possibility is that there's a very, teaching can be very enticing. You have students listening to you and you're, admired, you're respected. And if the teacher has incomplete personal, emotional traumas that, abandonment issues, they'll be like, oh, students are giving me attention. I'm now loved. I'm important. And that's very addictive. And they don't even realize that they're teaching because they're actually getting something out of it. In truth, the teacher shouldn't be teaching because they're getting something out of it. They're teaching because of just the mere need. You want to learn, I'm going to, of course, according to my nature, share the knowledge. But is the teacher getting something out of it? It shouldn't be the case. Of course, there's going to be friendship and there's going to be, positive feelings. But in overall, the mind of the one who passes it on should be clear. If it's not, but it is bound to get contaminated, to get misinterpreted, to get distorted in very subtle ways, and they are very hard to pick up. So in this sense, we have Duryodanas who are teaching, we have Arjunas who are teaching, and we have all sorts of people who are teaching. And it also takes some time for the listener to attune to the one who is not speaking from personal black or whiters. Oh, the world is like this, therefore don't do that. This also has to go away from the teacher. So eventually, assuming your mind is clear, you align to someone who is just opening up realities to you. They're not imposing their own stuff. Of course, that will happen. Everyone's going to do that eventually. But, there's a relative amount of, composure in the teacher, and you're able to just think in their space without being inflicted of how things are and what you should do, what you shouldn't do. That is your right. The teacher, Krishna, just shows what needs to be shown. What you do with that is up to you.
Could you say that this knowledge can be distorted for personal gain of whatever time and place and circumstance? Like, I think a lot of, especially religious conflict, a lot of it is distorted from the purity of what is said. It's distorted for some personal gain or power struggle, or to benefit some kind of movement, or you can see how it would distort over time, passages of time, and how it could branch out and have all these various meanings. So depending on the political environment, perhaps, or the social environment, or, cultural environment.
Indeed.
The distortions seem to come from there of any kind of scripture. You can see this pattern over history, which repeats itself, basically.
I agree with you.
Yeah. And sometimes it happens by accident. The person's convinced that the Gita is really speaking about, a different kind of, different concept. I'm not going to say which one, but we got divisions, Vishishta Advaita, Dvaita, Advaita. We've got ISKCON, you've got Advaita Vedanta, you've got different divisions get formed. So you have one message, and then that message starts to form formations or divisions based on the founder. Now, when you have people naturally aligning to a view, you will always find someone aligning to any view. When you have numbers backing it up, and numbers equals social proof, now that gains momentum, and it's very hard to bring it back. But then you ask yourself later on, it's not the end of the world, because suppose that person didn't create this whole different division, then you would have missed out on a whole different group of getting into Vedanta in the first place. Because at least like this, they're going to be exposed to Vedanta. Next life, you may get a different, more pure teaching, but at least you've been exposed, familiarize yourself with the teaching, even if it's not completely pure. So in that sense, nothing's really useless. It all serves a purpose to the seeker. It slowly takes them block by block by block to the final end. My teacher once said, Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.